have those around you brought up to speed and explain to in detail why you want to achieve and set the goals that you want to, why you want to achieve things you want to achieve, whatever the roadmap to that is. Because if they don't understand, there'll be friction. So how do you remove that friction? That's phase number one, I guess. What happens next?
Yeah, and I guess leading on from that would be during those discussions, during those honest discussions, you want to then establish, and this is more practical advice from me, I think, is what is actually honestly possible within the time that you've got. So I guess to look at my relationship, as we then said, okay, there's X amount of time in the day, you want to go and train for X amount of time, but let's look at the priorities, and the priorities of the kids, the family, work, etc. So if we have to attend to work, we have to attend to the kids, they have a certain amount of needs. Ashley and the kids come before these things in my priority list. So how much time is the right amount of time to give up for these things? And it may be less than it was, but there's certainly going to be time. So being honest about what's possible. Let's use, if 4 times I've been a daddy to brand new ones, and they take up a hell of a lot more time. There's a lot more stress, there's a lot less sleep, there's a lot more input that's required. Certainly for a new mum, there's a lot going on that any decent partner should be supporting. So then I can't go out into the hills for 6 hours for a jaunt because it makes me feel good. But it doesn't mean I can't go out into the hills at all. And it also doesn't mean that going out in the hills is off the cards until these things are right. It means that I then have to justify within a priority list what the minimum dose there is and whether that fits in and whether or not that's something that's going to be additive or what's the opposite of additive? Reductive, yeah. So that's another honest conversation. And I guess that is the example, is that when I was going out, each time we've had children, that we've gotten to a point where things have eased off a bit, routine has been reset, and I can go out into the hills for longer runs or longer time, or maybe an overnight or whatever. And then a new baby comes along and it all changes. Well, how much time can I give to it? How much time do I need? How much time do you need? And let's be honest about it. If I throw back, or cast back rather, to our first, I wasn't very good at that at the start. I kind of felt like, and I guess that's learning who you are and what those changes mean. I felt really compromised in terms of, or that's the wrong word, but felt kind of cut down the middle. I felt like I needed to chase my needs and my goals, and I had very specific goals at the time, very competitive goals, and also didn't want to be a bad father or a bad partner, and found myself kind of pulling one way hard and then pulling the other way hard and not getting it right. And it's because I really didn't sit down and figure out what was the minimum dose in terms of training. What can I get away with here and still move forward, or do I need to move forward? Can I put things in place that are just maintenance? Can I work that out? So I guess framing things in terms of the need and making sure that on a very, very practical sense from a training perspective, that session plans are organized so you're getting the most out of it for the least input, if that makes sense. That, again, that minimum dose, and allowing those sessions to be what they need to be, as opposed to maybe being used to doing like a 2 hour, I can do here, I got all these rest periods. It also gives me a chance to talk to this person, which is important in a training setting. But when you have other priorities, get in, do the primary work, the priority work, cut your rest periods to exactly where they need to be, and take out all the fluff, then get out. That could reduce a 2 hour session down to a 45-minute session, which is another 75 minutes you've just gifted back to your children and to yourself as a parent. I wasn't doing that very well, so I had to kind of really manage that stuff and ultimately say what is the most important thing here. But it didn't mean, and I thought it might mean, and this is what I was rallying against, that I had to give up training. It's like, it's not one or the other. It's how can you be intelligent about this? And I wasn't being.
I guess it's even things as simple as, if you've got a toddler and you want to train for your first Ironman triathlon, but you live 45 minutes away from the swimming pool, then maybe you need to reflect on the timing of that, or the structure of that, or do you have a pool that's a bit more accessible but might cost 25 quid more a month. Where does that fit in with the budget? Is this the right time? Et cetera, et cetera. It's things like you can't just optimistically and ambitiously charge towards something that isn't practical. And I think the message that I always really want to make clear with everyone as a bit of a counterculture to some things online is that there is a finite amount of time per day and people do have different circumstances, and the whole give things that need done to busy people because they'll factor it in and get it done applies to some degree. But equally, as a day-to-day operating person, you need to be realistic about and practical about what can be achieved. I mean, even me currently without kids, as somebody who trains very, very consistently as a fundamental component of how I make a living, everything that's going on, it's very, very difficult for me to effectively map in and plan in training at the moment around everything else that's going on from a business point of view, which, again, is something that I'm consciously trying to upskill myself in and better understand and better manage now, so that when I do have kids, I don't fall into the trap that we've had a lot of people sort of comment or reference us to, whereby they overestimate what can actually be achieved out of optimism or being bullied by somebody online telling them that they're not working hard enough, pussy, or anything like that. Because there's a lot of silly narratives, but you need to be realistic and practical. One, about what's actually available and possible, but two, look at the pattern of your behaviours and then actually ask yourself your question and be honest, put your ego to the side about what can you be compliant to.
Yeah, well, there you go, compliant. And we can use you as a great example there, because as you kicked it off, you do get, I don't for obvious reasons, but you do get, we'll try and do that with 2-3 kids and all the rest of it. So let's insert an imaginary kid into your life. Right now, you can't possibly do what you're doing.
I would currently have to, the way things are set up, is abandon or put to, well, it's prioritized, isn't it? I'd have to put business projects on pause or delegate them elsewhere or take myself out of them entirely to be able to continue to train. But you wouldn't
have to, and this is what...
For what I'm training for currently, key detail.
Key detail, yeah. But you could still train for... So you could still do what you're doing and not particularly have to give anything up. But what you would then have to do...
And I want to jump in and say I could still do that without having a gym outside the door there.
Yeah. So what you could do then, and this is what I did, is to look at, okay, so you currently give work this amount of time, you currently have this amount of time for Erin, you currently have this amount of time for staring into space and fire watching, which I know with you is very little. But you currently have these times segmented for these things, and you have a very specific kind of routine, and consistency was the word you used, and you are very consistent and deliberate in how you use that time. So it's not a far cry out. It's not a stretch to say, okay, can we manipulate that timeline a little bit? Clearly, I wouldn't want you to say, well, I'm only going to give 50% of the time I was to the business before because I want to continue training, because then we'll fold. So we've got to say, okay, so how much pushback can the business take? Well, ultimately, it could take a lot, and that comes down to our first point, which is communication. You talk to me and say, okay, Johnny, I'm now a new dad. I know you've been through this before. I want to be able to do everything I'm doing, but I've now got this extra responsibility. How much can we maneuver the workload that I've got around? And that's open communication, isn't it? So same thing. So we reduce a little bit of workload there. You can reduce a little. You just have to play with the variables. The analogy I often use with training and with this scenario is a mixing desk kind of thing. Okay, if I can turn this one up, maybe I can turn this one down a little bit, which allows this one to go up, and then now we've got balance again. If you just go whack, I'm just turning it all up to the top, it sounds terrible, it's unsustainable. So that's how to consider it. So yeah, you probably could still train for what you're doing, but it's which one do you turn down? How sustainable is that? What's the longevity of that? And back to my question, my point a minute ago about the honesty with yourself about what are the priorities and what are the needs. So we're trying to figure out in this hypothetical how to have you continue training like you're training now with the insertion of a child into the scenario. But then the question is, do you need to train how you're training? Is that goal necessary? Is it a priority over the child? Is it this, that, and the next thing? And you would probably be able to say, well, actually,
I wouldn't want to.
No, exactly. So but what we're not saying is you can't train. You can't train. You can't train effectively. You can't train athletically. You can't maintain your current athletic output. And we're saying, no, you can do all those things. You might not sensibly choose now to do the most extreme ultra marathon you've ever done before. But then who would when you've got a brand new child? But that doesn't mean that because you've got kids, you can never return to that, which is the inference of try doing that with kids. Well, I've got 4 and I've eased back when it's necessary and I've pushed forward when necessary. 250-kilometre Arctic run last year. And then, went to Peru to go through the Amazon. Was still there the amount of time I would have been there, still away from home. So still that burden was reflected in the family in a different way because I got ill. But ultimately, 4 children, a business with you, a wife who'd rather I was around. We managed to shuffle things around, compromise. We trained like hell, and I was able to achieve those things.
Important